The last week of America's groups is about to begin, and with only Envy and EG fully eliminated, this week it is all to play for. And those teams themselves are still quite interesting, as both have decided to have roster moves, and it will be interesting to see which of those pay off this week. Group Omega in particular is very interesting, as there is currently a three-way tie between NRG, 100 Thieves and Sentinels. Both Sen and NRG play each other, so their match could decide which of them is left out of playoffs, with 100 Thieves playing Furia for their needed win to stay in the group. Now without further ado, let's recap last week's game. Please like and subscribe so I can get monetization. The first game of the week was NRG versus Evil Geniuses, and exactly as you would expect, this match was a complete stomp. To be fair to EG, they did put up a bit of a fight at the end of the first half of Pearl, but it was still a stomp, though perhaps that was more to do with NRG's comp and Kiko having an off day, getting no value on the Killjoy. That said, watching the game, it never really felt like EG had a chance, even on Pearl, with the match feeling like a foregone conclusion from the very start. Thus, it is no surprise that, as I mentioned earlier, going into this week, Evil Geniuses have made 2 roster moves, with there even being rumours that they might replace Potter, their head coach, someone who is a staple of their roster and is arguably the face of the org at the moment in Valorant. You know, before they signed FNS. With them already out of playoffs, it is nice to see EG capitalizing on the opportunity to play crew with their new roster, something that will give their academy players time on stage, experience that will serve them well in stage 2. As for NRG, they looked dominant, but it is hard to really say anything else about them, as they didn't really show anything new in this match, because they simply didn't need to. With this week's match against Sentinels being arguably the most important of the stage, not just because it could decide whether they get into playoffs, but because it could decide the difference between them starting in the upper bracket and being relegated to the lower bracket as 4th seed. MIBR versus Leviathan was the second game this week, and this game was a banger. In fact, if you could go back and watch any game from this week, this one and 100 Thieves crew would be my 2 picks. With this game in particular having an intense back and forth between 2 teams with immense talent. MIBR seemingly having brushed off their loss last week in a surprise upset against Cloud9, came into this match swinging and knocked down Leviathan to 2nd seed in their group once more. Zekken in particular had a resurgence from the side of MIBR, his performance this week leaving no trace of what happened last week in his game. From the side of Lev, Neon went into this game full guns blazing. Unfortunately for him, it just wasn't enough to get them over the line. MIBR's 1-2 punch of Zekken and Aspas were just too strong for them on attack, even though MIBR seemed to struggle after their first 4 rounds on the attack side Haven. They did eventually get a handle on it, and I feel like it was more of a game plan issue than an individual issue with the players. As for Lev, I'm not entirely sold on their new Breeze comp, as I didn't really see the value in Sato's Omen, though I do get the idea is that he can do more individual plays than he would be able to on the Astra. I just think the utility loss is too great to ignore. Overall, both these teams are really strong and look to be favourites going into this week. MIBR especially, as they get to play Envy, who are making roster moves and don't look that strong. As for Lev, they play Loud, who looked a lot better this week, with Barty in their team instead of an assistant coach. That said, they do not look strong enough as of yet to give Lev a run for their money. The third match of the week was Crew versus 100 Thieves, and this game was a banger upset win for 100 Thieves, with them proving once again why you should never pick Bind against them, as no matter what roster they have, what year it is, they always seem to dominate on that map. That said, the second map proved that Crew fans shouldn't be despondent, as they came back and won a 13-10 Haven match, with Les and Sadak popping off, as they often have this split. The final map of Split was a very interesting match, as it put Crew's more meta comp pick of Neon Vice against the Sage Raze comp of 100 Thieves. And honestly, although it's not shown on the stats, Astana's mastery of Sage is the reason this comp works for 100 Thieves and doesn't work for Sentinels, as this timing and variation in placement of the wall and the slow orbs allowed 100 Thieves to control the rhythm of the game and stopped Crew's fast flood retakes on their defensive side. That said, at times it felt like Crew's team members were just used to over-peaking and getting away with it, often taking timings where there were none, which led to a lot of lost rounds, and honestly, this felt like a bit of a wake-up call, something that they will need before playoff. So Crew fans should be happy in a way that their loss came now rather than later in the playoffs, as they are pretty much guaranteed first seed anyway with their win over Furia. Especially as this week Crew's game is against EG, who just made a roster move and will not be very strong. As for 100 Thieves fans, they should take last week's Crew game as proof that they can win against Furia and hold hope that they will make playoffs, pushing either NRG or Sen out. Unlike their rivals 100 Thieves, Sentinels were not able to win the upset against Furia. In fact, they got dominated on the first map, with Split ending 13-4. This is despite them using a similar comp to 100 Thieves, with them using Neon instead of Raze. However, they don't play the Sage quite as well, with the wall timing and slow orbs often being misused or overly predictable. Breeze was completely the opposite story, however, with Sentinels running away with it with a 10-2 first half on their attack side, with Furia making a resurgence on the second half, as most teams do on attack side Breeze. However, it was too little too late, and Sen had already gotten too far ahead. Unfortunately for this game though, the last map was a little disappointing, with it neither being a stomp nor a smashing victory for either side. This is despite the first half being quite competitive, as Sentinels' defense looked pretty decent and they ended the half 7-5. However, their attack was terrible, and they couldn't seem to figure it out, leading to them not winning a round after the pistol and bonus, something they will need to improve if they want to beat NRG this week. That said, if they make playoffs either way, this stage should be considered a success for this rebuild of a team, and Sen fans should be happy that their team is making progress rather than regressing like they were in kickoff. As for Furia, ironically they seem to have the fate of their last opponent in their right hand, as if Sen fail to beat NRG, it will be the result of their game that will decide who goes to playoffs between them and 100 Thieves. Shockingly, this next game was really fun to watch, though I imagine it could be slightly frustrating if you were a fan of one of these teams. Loud vs C9 was one of the most surprising games this week, after Crew 100 Thieves, with C9 losing 13-1 on Lotus, to come back and win 13-8 on Split, and finally ending 13-11 on Bree. This game was ludicrously close on the last map, with it arguably being lost by the fact that Zeppa mistimed an ISO ult in a 3 vs 5 scenario that ended with C9 losing the round, and thus the game. Shockingly though, as long as you discount the first map where C9 looked horrible overall, Zeppa didn't look that bad on the duelist, like compared to what you'd expect anyway. The main issue was the fact that on Breeze he lost every single ISO ult, something that is only more damning when you realise that C9's entire attack side was built off farming this ult and using it.
Does not belong to C9.
Some of it still worked for scaling,
as Zeppa pulls
they were able
into
to
the
kill the
arena
guy for free anyway after the ult ended.
Walls come
But
down.
they were down a player. As for Lau, they looked a lot better with Erdayan over Batty, with Erday himself having some amazing multi-frag moments. Overall, whilst I don't think they'll do well in playoffs, Loud are set up to do really well in Stage 2, with their whole team looking more synergistic now that they have Erday in it. As for C9, unless they beat G2 this week, they cannot make playoffs, something that is unlikely to happen with all the roster changes they're going through. The week ended with G2 versus Envy, and the most I can say about this game, really, is that it happened. With it honestly feeling like Envy were trying to break their own record and get another shortest game in Americas. It is no surprise to me that already this team has had rumours of roster changes, and I just wonder how many they'll do. As from the outside looking in, only Kesnit and Demon 1 seem like 100% keepers. Something that is a little sad if, like me, you've been following this team since they were rankers. The Yoru nerfs just hit extra too hard, and he hasn't made a recovery, so he seems to be the first one to go. But I would be surprised if they didn't make another roster move before the next stage. As for G2, there's nothing really to say. They looked really good. BABYBAY diffed Demon 1, something that is funny if you know about the comments Demon 1 made. But other than that, this game was over and Envy looked defeated. Looking to next week, G2 play C9 and should come out victorious, securing themselves top bracket in playoffs. As for Envy, they play MIBR and I really see no hope for them. But MIBR have disappointed before, so we'll see. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and be back next week when we discuss playoffs.